to show.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Off the Nets podcast. So I had to hit that Rhonda Shear USA all night. I can't even get the high pitch right now. My voice is all jacked up. So this week on the podcast, I'm going to have an incredible guest that I wanted to talk to him about his journey, and his journey specifically as it relates to weight loss, because I'm trying to shed some pounds myself. So I want to get some pointers from our guests and also just find out, just his story, and also jiu-jitsu. It always comes back to jiu-jitsu. So I want to welcome to Off the Mats this episode, Joshua Hill. How you doing, Josh?
Doing fantastic. Hello.
Awesome. Thank you for doing this. I do appreciate you being the guest and sharing your time with me. So thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And definitely is something that's, I think a lot of people have kind of a struggle with. So it's kind of cool to talk about, and it's kind of cool to be able to speak to it as best I can. I mean, I'm just going along with it kind of like a lot of people do. So.
Sure. Absolutely. I always find it refreshing to speak to someone different to get their perspective, and specifically how it works for you, because, weight loss isn't a one size fits all type deal. It's different for everyone. So it's always interesting to see, where things came from for you and how you got to where you are currently. So how everything started for you. So first off, you train jiu-jitsu as well, correct?
Yeah, I train 6 days a week.
Well, that's part that'll cut some of that weight right there.
Yeah, that took a lot of it right there. Yeah, I train Monday through Friday, and then I take Saturday off, and then I do an open mat on Sundays.
Nice. That's a good spread there, and open mats are always so helpful. So that's solid. So when you were losing weight, so when did it all start for you? Like, at what point did you say to yourself, like, man, I got to do something here?
Yeah. So, like, I've tried losing weight different ways, right? Like, I've tried keto, and I was like, oh, I got a lot of success with that. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, I ate a crunch bar or something, I'm off keto. And next thing I know, I lost 50 pounds, but gained back 75, right? So keto failed, and I just didn't think keto was sustainable. And a friend of mine, she's a nutritionist, and she said, from her perspective, keto is like terrible because it's basically telling your body you're starving all the time. And so she said, unless you're like taking all the vitamin supplements to not like basically kill your kidneys, because you're just putting so much strain on your kidneys and going into ketosis, that it's basically a shortcut, and it's just really not the healthy way to do it. And so I took her advice, and I stopped, and I ballooned back up. And then in February, right before the pandemic started hitting, my brother overdosed on fentanyl and ended up in the hospital, and he ended up passing away. And my brother is just in great shape. I mean, my brother's younger, and he was just, it was really sad to kind of like, I'm sitting here, I'm like this, 365 pounds, maybe 350 pounds. I don't exactly know. 'Cause once you start getting high enough, you stop stepping on the scale, because you're like, oh, this shirt kind of fits. I don't need to know, so you don't really watch your weight at that point. And so I'm sitting there watching him in the hospital, and, nurses are walking in, and he's a good looking guy, and he's just ripped, right? My brother worked out all the time. He was a hard worker. And the only reason he survived an overdose initially to make it to the ICU was because he was in such great shape. And, at the time, he was 26, and his body was just, ripped. And then over the course of the 2 weeks, his body, you start losing the muscle mass when you're not working out as much. And I just remember thinking, like, man, like, he's sitting there dying, and so am I, right? Because I'm right next to him. And I'm like, I need to do something about this. And then to honor him was like, I want to get in his shape, like, because him and I were built the same. We had the same frame, right? And he was just using it better than I ever did. And so then the pandemic started picking up, And of course, we're all in lockdown, right? And obviously, everybody knows, like, the biggest risk for COVID and dying of COVID was obesity and being heavy. So at that point, I remember I was in the grocery store and everyone's got their masks on. I have my gloves on, and I'm just like sick of this. Like, I'm like, I don't want to be afraid, right? I don't want to be. I need to do something, and I can't do it with a mask on and stuff. And so my daughter was playing soccer, and they finally got back out to the fields, and they were like doing social distance soccer, which is kind of interesting if you've ever seen a soccer field. But they were just basically doing a lot of passing drills. Yeah. And I remember seeing one of those guys walk up, and he was one of the kids' dads, and he was just this alpha male, and he reminded me of my brother and my dad, like in just great shape. And I asked him, I was like, "Hey man, like, what do you do?" Because I knew he was a hard worker, right? This guy's name's Keith, and he's now one of my best friends. And I asked him, I said, "What do you do?" And he was like, "Oh man, I do jujitsu." And I was like, "Oh, is that kind of like Muay Thai?" And he laughed. He was like, "No." No. And he just laughed and he explains it. And I was like, "Oh, it's kind of like wrestling." He's like, "Yeah, that's close to it." And he's like, he's like, "I've got mats up in my house. Do you want to come wrestle or come do some rolls?" And I said, "Sure." And so I went over to his house, and immediately I wrestled back in high school for a couple of years, and it kind of came back to me. I was just like, "Man, I fucking love this," And I'm like, I can do this. And I remember just getting the sweat on. And I also at the same time was doing some work on my house. So I started losing a little bit of weight just from doing the yard work. And like I was putting in a driveway. So I was building a retaining wall during the summer. And so anyway, so at that point, like I felt confident that I did enough outside yard work to get on the mats. And he said, "Yeah, email our professor. And when you email him, just tell him you know me." So I did. And I showed up on a Monday, and I haven't left. I remember they asked him, and he was like, "Hey, are you good to roll?" Like, asking if I wanted a break. And I just didn't want to be that big, heavy guy and just be like, "Yeah, I need a break." And I just kept pushing through. I was like, "Fuck it." I was like, "I don't need no break," and I just kept going and kept going. And yeah, I've been there. So that my first day was September 1st of 2020. So it's just been over 2 years now.
All right, cool. And I was just gonna ask, like, what around about when you started. So yeah, just over 2 years. That's pretty good run, and especially considering what was all going on, because I know a lot of places everything was shut down. I think we opened back up on the same July, and we didn't feel right until about maybe September, October. Just didn't feel like jiu-jitsu. Like we had to come in, and we had the mats we had squares taped off. It's like, okay, you have to do your solo drills in these squares, and you got to wear your mask. And it was really bizarre, but I mean, it's still good that was available to you, especially during those times. So good.
Yeah, they had done, I guess, some video jujitsu. But Keith's house, I guess, was kind of like a prohibition jujitsu studio because he had the mats upstairs in like a loft area. And so he would have people coming over, and they were like, can we roll? And it was like people were coming over to his house and getting a fix. So he became like kind of the nucleus of like a lot of people coming over and using the mats because there's no, liability. It's just a guy in his house hanging out. Right. So it was cool because, he really made that available to me, and I was able to, exercise on that. And then once I got over to the school, I remember like, it was just kind of like a lot of people were like, "We're not talking about the COVID stuff. Like, if you're sick, get out. If you feel the symptoms, get out. Don't come around," and all that kind of stuff. So that was just like the big part of it. Like we were rolling, and I remember the first guy I rolled with, a good friend of mine, Addison. He was probably, I think, 180 pounds or so. And like I said, I was around 350 at that point because I did step on the scale after I was done with the yard work, and I saw I was like at 348. And I realized that because I was doing the yard work for a couple of weeks, I'd lost obviously some weight. Like I could notice that difference. So I got in there about 348, 350, and Addison was 180, and he just destroyed the shit out of me. and he was, I think, a two or three stripe white belt at the time. And I was just like thinking, like, there's no way this little guy is gonna fuck. Oh my, okay, tap. You know what I mean? I was just like, another, you know. And so I just did it again. And I mean, it was probably a good month and a half straight of just being choked and abused by men and women alike, you know. And our professor, he threw like girls at me. He was like, "Yeah, they'll kick your ass too." And I wasn't like this big like they can't touch me type thing. You just kind of naturally think like I could probably hold my own, and you're just like, no, these people have a superpower, and it's called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Have fun. And so that was a big part of it too. I have a competitive nature, and obviously wanted to get fit for my brother, and then also I have a daughter, Avery. She's 11. And for me, it was wanting to be here for her, right? And making sure, like, as we lost my brother, like seeing, obviously death, everyone's seen death at some point or another. And when it's family, it's always tough. But I didn't want to imagine a world where she had to lose her dad at a young age because of whether it be COVID or obesity or heart disease, etc. So I really, that was the final, I think, kind of X on the list of things of like, dude, you got to fucking get off your ass and do something about this shit. And yeah, so that's kind of that's how my journey got started.
And you said that you wrestled previously, like back in high school and stuff like that. Were you back then just, heavier then, or were you more, I guess, fit for the times, like for wrestling?
No, I remember I didn't do any sports at all growing up. Like I was a big video game nerd, loved video games, comics, and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I was walking around campus and this wrestling coach comes up to me, and I was in football at that point. Like I started playing like on the fifth quarter team for football just to kind of like get a jersey on and try to do something. And I remember he came up to me. He's like, "You need to wrestle." He's like, "You got the legs for it." And I'm very bottom built. Like my thighs are fucking huge. And so he wanted me to wrestle. And so when I jumped in the wrestling team, I was at 195 my freshman year. And I'm 6 feet now. I don't know where I was when I was in high school height wise, but I don't think I was that much shorter. But I was 195. And so I got down to about 185, 180, just wrestling. So I wrestled the 189 weight class. And then I also wrestled 215 because we didn't have a 215. So we had two people in the 189 weight class. And so this guy, Mark, and I, we would alternate who would take 215 and who would take 189, unless it was a tournament, and then we would both enter for it. And then at one point I got down to about 172, but it was really short lived. I don't know why I didn't stay there. I think it was just kind of a fluke that I got that low all of a sudden. I just dropped a lot of weight. But yeah, I stayed at 189 weight class for my freshman, sophomore year. And then we moved around a lot as a kid. So I didn't really, I went from Carlsbad High School to Orange Glen, which was out here in the San Diego area. And so when I went to Orange Glen High School, I just didn't wrestle. It was just one of those things where I just went to a new school and met some new folks and spent more time, I think, hanging out with my friend Mike and just calling and hanging out and playing Zelda and playing Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and shit like that. And wrestling just kind of went to the wayside, and I just felt a lot more comfortable at that point playing with nerdy stuff rather than going back to wrestling. And I did really well when I was a freshman and a sophomore, but I just didn't stick with it in high school when I changed.
Sure, I get you. I mean, wrestling is a weird one because it's like when you're doing well in it, it's very rewarding, I'm sure, but it's so tough that it's like once you're away, you're like, man, fuck that. Like as you mentioned, Zelda is like, yeah, I'll take Zelda over, fucking doing burpees and running and all of that. I still think wrestlers are psychopaths, and no one's going to convince me otherwise. But hey, whatever. I think us people who do jiu-jitsu, we're not tightly wound either, but I think wrestlers are even fucking more crazy because
I don't know, man. Like I think if you find like wrestlers are psychopaths, which I may not disagree with, I think people that do jujitsu got to be like a bit of a sociopath or masochist or something like that, because
Yeah,
there's
true.
definitely some kind of there's something there when you're like, oh yeah, getting choked, maybe that's fine. It's not a big deal,
Yeah. Yeah. Like when I'm getting any kind, if I'm in any kind of a awkward position, especially like guillotine, or even if somebody's got my back, I just start giggling and smiling, and I might even like start singing, like not like blatantly like sing, but I'm like humming a song, and it's like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? Like, dude, trust me, I'm scared. This is what I do when I'm scared. Would you rather me pee myself? Like,
What are you singing? Is it like nursery songs? Like, are you just like going back into like a fetal position and you're just like rocking and you're just like,
yeah, it varies. Sometimes I used to be a preschool teacher, so I might hum John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, shit like that. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? Like, just let him do it. He'll tire himself out, and then he'll tap.
yeah, when Dante starts singing hands, shoulders, knees, and toes, he's about to submit.
It's like, are you telling me which submission to go for? Yeah, just no wrist locks. Uh, but no, that's again a fair journey though, because wrestling it's rewarding, but at the same time it's really crazy. So choosing video games and you know the nerd life over going out there and again being a lunatic. I'm gonna choose that nerd life every time, but I get you. But yeah, so as began jujitsu and kind of started going through your weight loss journey, what was your nutrition like? What was like the diet routine for you?
Man, it was kind of interesting. So it was two things at the same time that are completely opposite on the spectrum. So one, I really didn't change a whole lot intentionally. So what I mean is that like uh, I would still eat spaghetti and I would still eat everything I just wanted, but jujitsu naturally made me less hungry. We would after jujitsu, like we would because our class is at 6 o'clock at night and we run till about 7:30. We don't get out till 7:45, and if you stay for a couple extra rounds, you're not leaving till 8. So we would go over and get like a juice or something afterwards. And a lot of the guys that would be at their dinner, and I would go home, and my wife would have dinner ready and stuff. But I just wouldn't eat that much. I'd be like, I'm just kind of full, whether it be the juice or the exercise. So naturally, I just started intaking less. But I didn't really change what I was eating unless I was competing. Then I would try to strategically, because I like to compete quite a bit. So I would change kind of what I'm eating like the week of. And I know they say not to do that, but I find that it's better to kind of be as clean as you can. So I do. So I didn't really change what I was eating, just naturally because of jujitsu. I started changing how much, and then I never really thought of food as fuel. I was just thought of like food as like delicious. And then a buddy of mine got laid off one day, and he calls me up. He's like, "I need a buddy." And I'm like, "Okay." And so we went over and we went to a bar, and I called my boss. I said, "Hey, my buddy just got fired. Can I go leave work early?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And I work from home, which is also a big reason of why I gained so much weight so quickly, because I was not even getting out of the house. Like my commute was making sure the dog wasn't in the hallway tripping me up. So anyway, so I called my boss and he said, "Yeah, go ahead and go over." So I went over to meet my buddy for brunch. It was like 11 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. And we had, I think maybe like one or two cocktails. And like I had this potato dish. It was like hash browns and eggs and some shit. And that was at 11 o'clock. Right. And then when I got to class later that night at 6, we did warm-ups. And dude, I was so freaking dead. Like I was dragging ass in warm-ups. And I'm like, holy shit, what I put in my body matters. And that at one point, I think was a giant eye opener for the weight loss journey, right? It was like going, oh, so there's a correlation to my fuel intake and my fuel expenditure. So then like I started, making sure I was cutting back on alcohol, and I started cutting back on, really heavy complex carbs and such like that at certain points of the day. And specifically, like I try to make sure I eat now by like 11. I'll try to eat like a good sized meal by 11. And then around 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, I'll try to have a little snack of some carb or something, just to give myself a little fuel, maybe some grapes, something's just simple. But yeah, so once I started noticing the fuel in and fuel out portion of it, that's when I saw some spikes. Because when my first month and a half of jiu-jitsu, I think I probably lost like 30 pounds right away. Like I got down to about 320 by November, and I started in September. So that, and again, I started around 350. So I saw a big drop off right away. And then, so that was pretty much the answer to that question, was more around, the fuel. But yeah, to me now, and then I got to a spot where I got really stuck and I plateaued at 265. And that's kind of jumping up in time, but around 265, and now I'm currently 235-ish right now. And when I was around 265, 270, I plateaued for months. And I noticed that shirts were changing. My clothes kept changing. I started off at a size 48 waist, and around 270, I think I was at size 40 waist. And I was really getting frustrated. And luckily for me, jiu-jitsu, right? Because any weight loss journey, you're going to hit those plateaus, right? And the thing you always hear people say is just push through it, man. Just keep going. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You hear all these cliche things, which are true, but they don't necessarily help you, right? You're like, I know what I need to do, but I'm really frustrated. And how do you keep moving if you don't see results with weight loss, right? But because the weight loss almost became secondary to the jiu-jitsu, right? At some point, I started clicking in my head that I want to lose weight to be better at jiu-jitsu, not jiu-jitsu better to lose weight. So it kind of reversed itself, where there was a point where I couldn't tie my shoes, man, and I had to like do this weird, awkward lean to the side to tie my shoes. And now over here, I'm doing half-ass barambolos. You know what I mean? So it's like, so it got to a point where I really just wanted to do jiu-jitsu, which helped me through those plateaus, which I think where I've had struggles in the past before was I would go to the gym, I'd lose all this weight, and then it would stop. So the jiu-jitsu for me was that. And then once I was at that 265, a buddy of mine, Josue, who really helped me a lot with this, because he was also really heavy when he started. And so he gave me a lot of pointers, and he really took me under his wing. And we went to the sauna together. We started going to the gym together. He started helping me out with a lot of diet stuff, going, dude, don't eat that shit. And he goes, here's what you should eat. And so he would send me things and, really help motivate me and give me more ideas. And so really he's like, why the hell aren't you counting your calories? I'm like, well, I think I have an idea of what I'm eating. And then once I started counting calories, I'm like, oh, I'm a fucking idiot. So I realized that, 2 giant bowls of rice isn't 200 calories. Right. So anyway, so once I started counting calories, I kind of like did a little sprint from 260 to 240. And that's kind of where I've gotten to from here.
Yeah. When you mentioned the shoe tie-in part, that made me chuckle, because I know I run into that every so often. And I'm not too heavy, but there are times when I go to tie my shoe and I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, all right. How do I get this? And my daughter, she's not quite at that point of shoe tying yet, so I can't convince her to do it yet, because little kids, they love to tie some shoes once they learn. So I still got to cut some weight myself.
Yeah. But, and I'll tell you, I had to have my daughter tie my shoes sometimes, and it was embarrassing. And then she's such a sweetheart. She'd be like so happy to do it. But I was like embarrassed. So I'd be like, I got flip-flops, and out here in California, flip-flop weather is generally 12 months of the year anyways. So I can get away with that. Obviously it hurts your back and all that kind of stuff. But so I really started just going towards flip-flops. And then once I started losing the weight, I noticed that also like shoes fit more comfortably because my feet weren't so swollen and big. And, I really think I was at a spot where I was pre-diabetic, because I would have like blood sugar drops and my feet were kind of looking diabetic-ish. When I first started my journey, when I first started before I did jiu-jitsu and all that. So
sure.
that was something that was kind of also adding up. And there's just all these like health warnings where you're like, that click in my heart doesn't feel good right now. And you just ignore it and you just realize it's just probably a thing. I remember there's this Louis C.K. joke where he talks about having bad knees, and he goes to the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh no, you're 40. That's just what you do. You just live with you and your shitty knee until you both die. And I always thought that was funny, but I would always use that as like, oh, I just got a shitty rib, and no, my fat belly was poking through my rib and I was, giving myself a hernia. So it was just like all these things where I would just ignore health signs that I shouldn't have ignored for too long, and tying shoes being one of them.
As you're mentioning all these warning signs, I'm like smirking over here, but I'm thinking like, oh shit, oh fuck, like god damn it. But I like honey buns. I mean, but it's true. We've gotten to a point in our culture where we're just, we think, oh, okay, well, it's just that, you just live with it. And then next thing you know, it's too late. So, I'm glad, you took the initiative, you started making strides in the right direction and just understanding that, because, before we know it, pre-diabetic becomes diabetic, and then it's all just a shit show from there. So I'm glad you went the other way versus many others, myself included, where we're just like, just embrace who you are. Except that I'm not going to let anybody fat shame me.
Like, dude, and there was a point where it was after my brother had passed, shortly after we had went to Disneyland. And we went to Knott's Berry Farm, which is kind of another theme park out here. It's not too far from Disney, but it's more of a roller coaster park. And I remember I couldn't get on the rides with my daughter. And I'm just sitting there in tears, right? Because the latch won't come down. And this poor 17-year-old kid is trying their fucking best to get this thing to make the 3 clicks. And they're like going, dude, just exhale. 1, 2, 3. We both got this. And they would like shove the thing down on my chest. And I'd be like, we're good. And my daughter's like, yeah, we rode this, Dad, And then we went to Disneyland, and Disneyland was very much more forgiving on the rides. They go, hey, we know America's fat. Let's make sure that the rides fit, a good amount of Americans. And so Disney, I was like, yeah, I feel thin again, right? But then we went out to dinner with some friends, and he had gastric bypass surgery, and he had lost a bunch of weight. And he was showing me these pictures, and I had no idea like how heavy he had been. And I remember, we all split a dessert, and I'm just sitting there, and I never really had much of a sweet tooth, and I just started crying. My daughter's like sitting there going like, is everything okay? And like my friends are looking at me, and they are just like sad as well. Like no one finishes the dessert. I ruined the night for everybody. But I was like saying, I just don't want to be fat anymore. And I was happy that we got to go to Disneyland and ride most of the rides. But like, it was really a part where I think that was the biggest turning point after my brother had passed. And it was just like, I couldn't keep moving forward in the direction I was going. And so it just kind of like all came back, and I was just like, you know what, enough's enough. Like that again was another one of those X's that was just on my list of like things that were just like, hey, dude, wake the fuck up. So
where you're at now in your journey, you say you're down to 235?
Yeah, I was like 234 this morning. I think after dinner, I'm probably like 235. So yeah, I'm trying to get down to 217 because the ultra heavy weight bracket, which is where I compete right now, is a fucking beast. Like, guys in that weight bracket, man, they're either like 230-pound collegiate football players that decided to start jiu-jitsu, and they're just giant men that are chiseled Greek gods, or you got guys that are like 500 pounds and they're trying to do what I'm doing, right? And they're just out there trying their hardest. And you get under some of these guys and you can't move, right? And it's like, it's really frustrating because you got other brackets and it's like 195 to 205. You're like, okay, there's not a whole lot of where you can go in that 10 pounds or whatever it is, right? Where when you've got 225 and up, I mean, it's and up. There was one guy at a tournament and he's still doing jiu-jitsu. But the first time I saw him, he was really heavy and he had this giant gi on, and I felt bad because like he's out there killing it, right? And he was inspiring to watch, but I'm like, man, it's just like it's hard to go up against someone like that because he doesn't want to be the guy that's like just laying on anybody, right? But at the same time, it's like there's not much you can do because if you get side control on him, he's just going to flip you. And now I saw him at a tournament a couple months ago, and he had lost also like 150 pounds or something. And he's still a big guy, but he's just getting there, you know, and he's just going through it. And he's like, hey, man, we're in this together. I'm like, dude, fucking amazing. So I'm glad it's not just me that's also finding this outlet, because I really want to get to a spot where I can compete in super heavy. But with that being said, I went to ADCC this weekend, and watching the ultra heavy matches in the highest levels when guys are like super athletic, I'm like, it's kind of tempting to just say, forget going skinny and just get really bulky. And, you know what I mean? And just get like super muscular and just like own all the local competitions. So.
Yeah. And, yeah, you messaged me about ADCC. How was that experience for you?
Dude, without a doubt, probably one of the best sporting events I will ever go to in my lifetime. I've been to football games, baseball games. I've fallen asleep at basketball games and baseball games both. And I've been to jiu-jitsu tournaments, you know, local and, you know, some IBJJF stuff. And this by far was so intense. The crowd was amazing, right? Everybody would be silent when they should be silent. Everyone was, you know, cheering when they should cheer, and watching the athletes. And you're talking the biggest names in the sport right now, right? You're seeing Gordon Ryan going up against Galval, and Gordon Ryan, I just don't understand how he is that much better than everyone else just out there. Like, I mean, he's submitting high-level black belts in like 15 seconds or whatever it was. Like, he's just like going in there. He's like, oh yeah, Ashigarami heel hook, we're done. And we're like, what the fuck was that, dude? Like, it's mind blowing our minds, right? And then, you know, you're seeing, you know, people like Gabby Garcia, you know, getting beat by Amy Campo, and Amy Campo is like just out there, and you could tell she's just fighting her heart out. And, you know, Gabby Garcia is a super nice lady, and she's sitting there, you know, it's like a David and Goliath battle, right? And I don't know if you know Gabby Garcia, but she's like a very, very like physically large lady. And Amy Campo like did this like dive in for a single leg, took her to the outside, and then we thought that she was just kind of like, oh, like, okay, I got my points for takedown, but she's out of the stands and she's trying to fucking armbar her, and we're just like losing our minds, dude. It was the coolest thing. Like, it was just such high intensity and so much skill all in one building. I mean, I was even talking to a buddy of mine, and he was like, oh, you going to the Abu Dhabis this weekend? And he doesn't even do jiu-jitsu. He just watches it. And I'm like, dude, this is a fucking big deal. You know, Joe Rogan, people were there. I mean, it wasn't just a local tournament. You know, I'll say that. It was the Olympics for jiu-jitsu.
I don't know. I think this was the first time, because, you know, I'm out here in Maryland. And also I was at work. You know, I got people like, dude, are you watching this on Flow right now? I was like, no. Like, I actually talked to one of my teammates. I was like, dude, you want to like go in on a Flow account? He was like maybe. And I was like, fuck it, dude, I'll do it. I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it. Like, just like, come on, let's go. Like, I'll pay for it, and like, you just pay me increments over, you know, I don't care. You know, then you know, it's like, well, you know, he started talking some logic to me. I was like, okay, I got you. Went back to, you know, doing my work, I guess, aka taking naps. And I look up on Instagram, and it was just like all this amazing jiu-jitsu taking place, all these upsets taking place.
Yeah.
And in that moment, like looking at this, and then, you know, just everyone, like, I'm getting messages from people, you know, about it. It's like, I feel like this is that moment that's, you know, jiu-jitsu's growing, and it's becoming more and more known. But I feel like this weekend's ADCC was one of those shining moments that, as the sport continues to grow and get eyes on it, I think the 2022 ADCC is going to be one of those moments that people, you know, call back to and say, look, it was here. that this momentum really shifted. Because again, you got Gordon Ryan out there just making the shit look easy.
Dude, 100%, man. And the go back to the Flow account. Another reason is we were in the stands, and when you're at a live sporting event, you don't get those instant replays that you want. Dude, we had it on Flow, and we're sitting there doing instant replays on our own. We're like, oh shit, it felt bad. Like Kendall Roosing tore her leg. She tore ACL,
Yeah.
MCL, LCL, fractured her tibia. And we're sitting there watching it, and from our perspective, it looked like she had hit her head on the concrete. Because the matches at ADCC, dude, it's like the fucking Wild West when it comes to the matches. Like, you go to an IBJJF tournament, and I want to talk about that later, man, because that's just another thing. But you go to an IBJJF tournament, and you barely step out of bounds, and like, oh no, reset. You go to ADCC, and it's like, even if you're looking at the trials, I mean, they got fucking people going into the stands, and they're still rolling and trying to go for a takedown, and they're pulling fold-up chairs and pushing them out of the way so that the athletes can continue trying their takedown. I mean, that's so exciting to watch. And, so go back to Kendall, is like, she was in this match and she had her arms, the lady was going for looked like a body lock takedown of some sort. And she ends up twisting her knee, going to the ground, and we pulled it back up on Flow instantly. And we're like, oh shit, that was a fucking knee. Like, you could see it clearly. And then finally, they pulled her off and, took her to the ER or whatever. But I mean, it was nice having Flow in our hands so we can do our own instant replay, which, you go to a baseball game or something like that, and you're kind of at the mercy of either Fox Sports or like, hopefully the commentators will replay what you want them to.
Yeah. It's jiu-jitsu in a very special spot right now where, we're kind of, this is the ground floor, and we're all in on that ground floor. It then becomes a question of, there's been talks over the years, people saying, do you think jiu-jitsu will ever be in the Olympics? And people are like, well, I don't want it to be in the Olympics. It'll get ruined. It's like, maybe not. I mean, you're going to still have ADCC. You're going to still have IBJJF. And honestly, I feel like these tournaments, these competitions are bigger anyway. Like, these mean more to our community versus Olympics. That's, more of a, every kid, at least me when I was a kid, in track and stuff. It's like, I want to run track in the Olympics. That was everybody's, dream. We want to run in the Olympics. Whereas if you're doing jiu-jitsu, there's no kid saying, I want to do jiu-jitsu in the Olympics. It's like, I want to, as kids, go to PANS, once you start, aging up, it's like, I want to go to Worlds, American Nationals, ADCC, things like this, those are our Olympics. Those are our, mainstream moments for the sport. And, honestly, it's an amazing thing to be a part of, to be a fan of. Like,
absolutely.
I can't really, like, even, my wife, she doesn't train, but she's aware, if I'm sitting there looking at something on my phone, she'll, come over, look over, like, oh, take a look at my daughter, same
Right.
deal. So, I mean, there is a interest, there's an interest, to people. And I used to get frustrated because I'll see cornhole on ESPN. What the fuck is this? Like, but
Right.
we can't get jiu-jitsu on ESPN. And the thing is, though, it's almost kind of like it like Flow. I mean, their format is what it is because, like they said, they want to appeal to the actual fan, the grappling fan, whether it be Flow grappling, Flow sports, period, whatever it is. They want to appeal to the hardcore fan versus the casual that may come in every so often. Like, imagine jiu-jitsu's on ESPN, and it's done a great deal for ESPN as far as the UFC goes. But I can only imagine jiu-jitsu being on ESPN, and they got like the little tweets in the corner.
Yeah.
and Stephen A. Smith, stepping in to say something that's uneducated, and like, well, Gordon Ryan, he is the king, but it's like just
right.
Stephen A. Shut the fuck up.
Right. Someone with their
There's no but.
counter. There is no but. Like he was just like, oh yeah. Like they asked him afterwards, like, how much energy did you expend? He's like, oh, 70%. And he takes out Galval, body triangle, rear naked choke, and you're just like, holy shit, that was 70%. And then it's like, which they're not even talking about, right? So going to ADCC, he competed in the full tournament bracket Saturday and Sunday. And the other thing is he was there signing things for fans until I think like 9:00 at night on Saturday. He was there on Friday with fans. He was there on Thursday. He was there like the entire time, burning up all this energy. And then even when he went to go compete with Andre, like he literally waited till the very last match, went over, walked around, and came. There was no warm up. He goes straight from the last match to maybe a 5-minute intermission, 10 minutes. Like there's no warm up there. Like, and he goes out and beats Galval, which Galval didn't compete in anything. I don't want to take anything away from Andre, but like the fact that like Gordon was there for that entire time, competing, signing stuff with fans. He had a whole booth set up, and it was amazing to see, man. And it's like, he is the Muhammad Ali of jiu-jitsu. And I think if we were to put it in an Olympic sport, it would be great because it would give Gordon Ryan a showcase, right? But I think that judo has its place in the Olympics because you look at wrestling, they took wrestling out. And I mean, wrestling is one of the biggest college sports for young athletes, one of the biggest high school sports. And women's wrestling right now, I don't know about Maryland, but California, it's getting huge. Like the number one female scholarship right now is golf. And the number 2 unused scholarship is wrestling, and for females. And if you were to take a look at putting jiu-jitsu in that sport and taking it to the Olympics, I think it would either do really well for judo, or it might make judo go on the back burner. And I would hate to see that happen. One of my good friends, Patrick, he owns a jiu-jitsu school up the street from us on Lake Elsinore, Shimaru. And he's got like spring mats because they do a lot of judo throwing. And he does jiu-jitsu classes and he does judo classes. And I used to hate the idea of being thrown and taken down, but it wasn't until like those spring mats that I felt comfortable, because as a big guy, like, okay, 250-pound guys throwing each other, maybe not a big deal. When you've got a 300-pound man that you're throwing and hitting the ground, my bone structure isn't that much different, like that's a lot of pressure point impact. And so the spring mats are nice. And because of judo, I've learned a lot of judo techniques now that I use in my jiu-jitsu. So I would encourage anybody like that wants jiu-jitsu to be in the Olympics, and maybe there is a conversation for it, try your judo out and see what you should be doing with judo, because that was a big step up in my game, was being able to, and I don't go to judo. I haven't gone to actually judo classes in a while, but I've taken the judo techniques and I kind of got past that fear. And now I'm using judo techniques in my opening for my takedowns, because I really don't want to use my wrestling. I hate shooting. Trying to shoot a blast double or a single leg, 235 pounds, that's a lot of weight going down and coming back up. I'd rather just try to throw the shit out of somebody. So I'm just, it's a lot there, but like, I think that, jiu-jitsu would be great to have in the Olympics. It's going to be cool to say, but I think that judo is a good spot to watch.
Yeah, I think, the argument, well, I don't know about the, IOC and what their discussions are, but I think a lot of people in our positions, their argument is that wrestling and judo, jiu-jitsu is too similar to both of them on different spectrums. So I don't know. I think, if you put jiu-jitsu in the Olympics, it does put it on a world stage. It gives a showcase, for the average, viewer, whether they stick around to watch it. Because the unfortunate thing is I don't hear a lot of people talk about the judo competitions at the Olympics. Wrestling, I hear a little bit, not a whole lot, but whenever they have judo in the Olympics, you don't hear a whole bunch. And I wonder if that becomes kind of a fear too with jiu-jitsu. It's like, we'll obviously tune in as, the community always comes together. But I think a big thing for it, or a big hope for it, would be, again, showcasing it to the world, showcasing it to my grandma who,
Right.
watches the Olympics, shit like that, but, would it matter, at that point? Or are we just better off keeping it where it's at and then letting it grow from that point? Because I would like there to be some kind of a bigger exposure, but I say that now. But when UFC got its exposure on ESPN, I got pissed. Everyone, like, all of a sudden, I got people at work talking to me like, "Oh yeah, like I watch that shit." It's like, okay, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Like, you're still talking about Chuck Liddell. Like, that's come and gone. That's almost 20 years ago, son. Relax. No, he just fought Tito not too long ago. Yeah, he shouldn't have.
No.
He definitely should not have fought Tito.
No, that was
Yeah.
very sad. Did you watch that documentary that's on Netflix about that? About Chuck Liddell and Tito?
Yeah, dude. Like, I'm gonna go revisit that because I watched it a while back and I was like, dude, like, I didn't know, like, I didn't know the story at all behind it. I didn't know they're like friends. They like train together and stuff. Like, I was just like, oh, I thought these were just two motherfuckers in the UFC.
Right.
It was that time, and Tito does what Tito does: talk the shit, and let's go. So
Yeah.
it's and again, ESPN has its place in sports, and really highlighting things, as time goes on. I think Netflix has a jiu-jitsu documentary, maybe, in the works. So jiu-jitsu is going to get its day in the sun. But I think where we are with it right now as a community, this recent ADCC is right now like our Super Bowl. That's the top of the mountain right now. And it was
100%.
amazing.
100%. And I think that if jiu-jitsu does make its way to the Olympics, I think it would have to be no gi grappling. Like,
Oh yeah.
I think that, the gi is, and I don't want to say like being phased out, right? But I really think that because of its close relationship to MMA and how exciting MMA is, in gi you have a lot of opportunity to stall, whereas no gi you really don't have as much of an opportunity unless you go to wrestling, which is why wrestling was phased out of the Olympics, right? Is that it wasn't bringing in any viewers because they would just sit there in a lockup and they would have two collar ties, and that would be the wrestling match, right? So I think that with jiu-jitsu and the penalties that they have, that they're at least using the ADCC rules. I think if maybe they had a rule set like that where you definitely encourage the groundwork, you put a timer in and points go live at 5 minutes later. I think if you had something to that effect, use ADCC rules, you could see it in the Olympics, and it wouldn't maybe take away from the judo portion of it. It would be probably no different. I mean, who the hell wants to watch fucking 8 different things of swimming, right? I don't get that. Like, I think the only reason swimming is as popular is because Michael Phelps just went in there and dominated, right? So if we got Gordon Ryan in his prime, what's that?
Said shout out to Maryland.
Yeah, right. Crab cakes and Michael Phelps. Congratulations, Maryland.
That's all we got right now. The Ravens just lost to the Dolphins, so we right now, we don't got much.
That's funny. Yeah, it's which, by the way, side note, because I started jiu-jitsu, I haven't followed football in 2 years.
Dude, that happened to me in the beginning. Once I got into jiu-jitsu, I stopped paying attention. Like, I ran fantasy football leagues and everything. I was like balls deep into all this stuff. I love football. I still enjoy football, but once jiu-jitsu started for me, all the other sports that I enjoyed, they're just like kind of fell to the back burner. I might catch it on ESPN late at night before bed, but I wasn't invested. It was all about, let me go on YouTube, watch these techniques. Let me go to BJJ Fanatics, pick up another set. It's. It's magic.
Yeah, I was watching. I was like at a Buffalo Wild Wings or something, and there was like football on, and I thought it was college football. And I was like, wait, today's Sunday, and it was the Washington team, and I had no idea that Washington Redskins got renamed. I mean, that's how far removed I was from football. I was like, oh my gosh, like it really just completely blew my mind. I was like, how did I miss something like that? And they're like, yeah, I don't even know what they're called. I think it's the Nationals. Is that right?
No, so they for 2 years they were called the Washington Football Team, which I'm not gonna lie, I kind of grew fond of that, just because it's me being a shitty person saying you guys don't have a fucking name for your team. They just call you the football team. Now they're called the Washington Commanders.
That's what it was. So the Commanders. Yeah. So I knew that they got changed to the Washington Football Team. And then the Commanders, I missed that one. So I missed that update.
The least they could do is get Cobra Commanders or fucking mascot. If they do that, I'm a fan for life. That's all. I'm not asking for much. I just want to see, at least at a game. We're gonna go to the game the weekend of Thanksgiving. So I think they're playing the Falcons. I'm hoping to see somebody dressed as Cobra Commander in the burgundy and gold. If I don't see it, I might be done with football because I know the Lions ain't going to do shit. They suck. So, like, I've lost all hope. If I can get a Cobra Commander, though, I will be a fan.
That's hilarious.
Win or lose.
Yeah, there's just a lot I feel like I've missed out on in other sports. You know, it's like if it wasn't for my work, I wouldn't have known that the Raiders relocated, right? So that was something that was kind of unique. The fact that Las Vegas also has a hockey team, that kind of came at me by surprise.
I didn't know that until I saw the Stanley Cup. I used to be a huge hockey fan, and I saw the Stanley Cup had the Golden Knights. I was like, "Who the fuck is that?" And I'm like, Vegas. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. And then I guess Seattle has a team now, because I saw Sports Center last year, and I saw they didn't show that it was Seattle. It said the Kraken. I was like, that sounds like some Seattle shit up there. And sure enough, it was. I was like, holy shit. Like, so Seattle's got a team. Vegas got a team.
So Seattle has a team called the Kraken?
Yeah. Like, it's fucking confusing. I
think that's their hockey team?
Yeah. I think they allowed Winnipeg to have a team back. I think they just said, take the Jets back. Like, why not? It's weird because it's like you said, once you got into jiu-jitsu, you kind of fell away from the spectator sport. But I think that's the unique and beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu. This is one of the only sports, probably the only sport, where you can go out there and train with Craig Jones,
right?
Marcelo Garcia, Gordon Ryan. You can train with, our Michael Jordans, our LeBron James, our stars. Whereas if you're a kid playing basketball, it's unlikely that your average, kid playing in the park is gonna, cross paths with, fucking Tim Duncan and play ball with them.
Dude, so out here in SoCal, we're really spoiled with the sport, right? Obviously, it has the whole shotgun bro culture from when it first kind of came up, and it really was introduced in the United States kind of through the Southern California area, right? And it's interesting and amazing at the same time when you go to a local tournament, and I'm talking like we have these ones out here called Grappling X. I don't know if you have Jiu-Jitsu World League, if they come out there or not. I know they go to Texas and stuff. But when I did Tap Cancer Out, right, like I was at these tournaments, and you're seeing Andre Galvao, you're seeing Gabby Garcia, you're seeing Kendall Roosing, Emma Roosing, Mackenzie Dern. You're seeing top names coaching kids, just chilling there. Oh, yeah, hey, you want a picture? Sure, no problem. And it's like, where would you have ever been in a sport when you have the top names and the top competitors in these sports just hanging out on the sidelines? My buddy Josue, the guy I was telling you about, dude, he fucking rolled against Kit Dale, like in a tournament. Like he just got bracketed with Kit Dale. I'm like, oh, this is your opponent. And like Kit Dale's a fucking, amazing guy. It's like, it was just amazing that this is what it's like out here. Like you have such an exposure to all these things. And then you wonder, like, when you see them on the big screen and you're like, it kind of almost mind fucks us because we're like, oh, well, they're a really big name, but I also see them like almost once a month at tournaments, you know?
Yeah. When we got IBJJF did the DC Open out here for the first time. And I remember I took my goddaughter with me to watch our team compete. And I remember walking in, and I got nervous just walking in. I get nervous for my team, so like fuck me if I try to compete again. Like my chest was about to explode just watch my teammates warm up. It's like holy shit. But walking in the door, Ryan Hall, like I held the door for someone. He was like, oh yeah, and it's like thanks. And I was like, I grabbed my goddaughter, I was like, holy shit. She was like, what? I was like, that's fucking Ryan Hall. She was like, who? I was like, never mind. It's just crazy that this sport, we can run into those top names, these top faces, and they're super nice,
Dude, they're super accessible. They just like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, picture, no problem. And you kind of almost have like this celebrity mind fuck of like going, no, I can't ask, LeBron James for a picture. Like that's terrible. But you're like, I'm sure if you just like ran, you're at a tournament, you see Craig, dude, he would take a picture, no problem. And they were, matter of fact, at ADCC, dude, they were doing that. Like if you went to go grab nachos, Gary Tonin was just chilling, and he was like, oh yeah, come take a picture, cool. And you're just getting a picture with Gary Tonin, which by the way, if there's ever, and we should see if we can get this trending, Gary Tonin for Gambit, he would 100%, if I don't even know if he can fucking act, he should be Gambit. End of story. Let's get a live Gambit going. Gary Tonin, let's go.
I'm down. But I'll get that in the stories going. There was a Danielle Kelly came out here, did a seminar a few months back, and I don't typically, whenever I post on social media, no one tends to see my face. It's even doing this sometimes is a struggle to me. I usually like have my face like off to the side and like covered up, or the room is dark so you can't really see me. So
for the record, if anybody's listening, his face is blurred out and I can't even see it. He's hiding behind a pixelated cloud.
Like pixelated everywhere I move. I moved to the left once and like the pixelation is like, oh shit, we're supposed to go with them.
It's like you're in one of those witness protection program interviews. It's like all dark.
The voice is all changed. It's like, huh, that sounded a lot different when we recorded. But I did seminar with Danielle Kelly, and afterward I tagged her, in the post, the stories, and she replied, I was like, oh my God, that was you. And it was just weird because it's like, this is like, again, a big name in our sport, and you get them in your DM like, dude, that was you. So like our sport is, jiu-jitsu's amazing, and I almost kind of don't want it to get any bigger than it is, because like the accessibility to the athletes, and everyone's relatively humble and just really cool. And I just fear, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, even if the sport picks up now. I don't think it's going to be anytime in the next 10 years where you're going to get people having major egos about themselves. Even with Gordon Ryan, seemingly, through social media, like people are like, dude, that guy's kind of a jerk. But actually, like everyone that I know that's encountered him was like, no, he's a sweetheart. He's such a nice guy. He like, it's like Kobe Covington in the UFC. It's like, he's a really nice guy, but there's a shit talker to kind of get that interest and get the crowd riled up for the fights. But behind the scenes, they're just nice guys. And I love that about the sport, is that it is full of nice athletes who we all have, a common goal, and that's to be, better than we were the day before. And whether that takes us to the top of the mountain at ADCC, or, you're killing it at local tournaments, or you're just, a hobbyist that's improving and growing in the sport, we all have the same goal, and it's to get better.
Yeah, dude. And so speaking of that, like when I was at ADCC and I was watching Gordon doing like his signings, like he took this blind guy from the side of the lines and like totally spent like some one-on-one time with him, and it was just like, it wasn't like your standard like celebrity book signing photograph. Like he was literally like, hey, bring that guy over here. he's blind. So he gave him like special attention, took him to the side so they could have a good conversation. And I'm like, man, I know this guy likes to act like a jerk on TV or on Instagram or whatever, but I think it's a character. Like, I think he knows that for the sport to be exciting, he needs to be a jerk to his opponents, right? And, even like this shit talking with Felipe Pena and all this stuff, if you go and look back, and you're mentioning Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell in that documentary, it talks about how Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali had these big bouts, and Muhammad Ali was this giant shit talker, right? And it drives an interest in the sport when you have a villain versus a hero, and whether the hero is your villain or vice versa, you get interested and you have a horse to bet on. But if you have two guys and they're just a couple of nice dudes and they're like, yeah, I really hope, he wins and I really hope I win. And, just as long as we have fun, right? Nobody wants to watch that. But if you go, it's like, that guy's a piece of shit and here's why, and I'm the best, bro, whatever. I'm going to get a shitload of money because he's going to pay my rent or my mortgage for the next 6 months. And you have that kind of shit talking, like, dude, that guy's like interesting, Yeah. But then you go back to the dichotomy of like, that's the Instagram persona. And then you watch him interact with people and he's just super nice. So it's funny. And hopefully people don't get that, but like,
Yeah. And the funny thing about it is like, like you're saying, the good guy versus bad guy, with the shit talking. The crazy thing is though, with, Gordon Ryan and even Gary Tonin, all of them, being big shit talkers. So it's like, oh, those are the bad guys, but no one can beat the bad guys. It's like, so it gets really weird because you're like, God, I want that guy to lose. It's like, fuck, they're not going to lose, are they?
Right.
They didn't break a sweat, did they? No. Fuck. Are they the good guys now? Well, I mean, we're going to cheer for them because they're really fucking good and we respect their skill. God damn it. But I don't want to, but you got to.
Dude, and so like that's like Bernardo Fario, right? So you look at Bernardo Fario and he's just like absolutely the nicest guy ever. My buddies, they went to that Origin camp up in Maine. Jocko's has an Origin and all that. And so they go up there and like Bernardo Fario's there and he's like taking pictures and like Jocko did like a video recording, like, doing the thing for my buddy's gym. And like the guys were just all super nice, right? And then Mikey Musumeci, I was listening to him on an interview. Like the kid sounds like one of the nicest people on earth. And it's just like the sport has its egos, right? And you need to have an ego to compete and to want to get better. But I think that sometimes that ego is easily put in check because it's funny. We were walking around ADCC. There wasn't any fights in the stands that I could see or anything like that because you don't know who the fuck's a black belt and will choke the shit out of your ass, right? So when you're out on the streets, you don't realize, like, if you think you're a top shit boxer, right, and you're like, I'm the fucking best, maybe you can fucking box somebody out. But when you start realizing jiu-jitsu and other people know jiu-jitsu and you don't know who knows jiu-jitsu, right? Go back to my buddy Addison. I was at the time, 350 pounds. He was 180. I would have never thought that if it got into a street scuffle, he would have kicked my ass. By the way, he's also, black belt in some other martial arts. And it's like, you would have never known that. But now when you start doing jiu-jitsu, those egos, they really kind of find their place. Yep. It becomes more, I think, of a shift into narcissism than it does become an ego. And you get them on the mats. I run into it a lot, especially as a heavier guy. There's a lot of fragile egos that happen. And it's a fucking pain, man. Like that's some of the stuff I've gone up against, man. The most hurtful thing is sometimes the people's egos.
Yeah. It's funny. Like when you look at other sports, not even just sports, but just going out and having that awareness of who knows what. Like I have a ton of different jiu-jitsu shirts, whether it be, something made by my friend Zach, who runs Student of BJJ, or my own shirts. It's some sort of reference to jiu-jitsu. And I started thinking to myself, I was like, I don't even want to. Oddly enough, I'm wearing a Batman shirt tonight. Normally, I have on a jiu-jitsu. It's either jiu-jitsu or comic book. One of the two shirts.
I think we could have interchangeable wardrobes. Like right now, I'm wearing the Strangle shirt, and this is my buddy's. And then all I have is Flash and Batman. That's I'm a big Flash nerd. If I could have any superpower, man, it would be a speedster or a teleportation. I love Nightcrawler, but I would definitely have to go to the speedster route. Sorry to cut you off. I just I just wanted to bond over the t-shirts, the t-shirt dilemma.
Trust me, I actually have a laundry basket over here full of t-shirts that I have to get rid of. And as a t-shirt guy, you never want to get rid of them, but it was weighing the shelves down in my closet, and they're about to crumble. So I was like, okay, I got to get rid of some of these shirts and not only wear so many. But then when I see, oh, I got a t-shirt with X-Men, number 13, on the t-shirt, I want to wear that. That's nostalgia for the 90s for me. So, but no, it's like going out. Like, I don't even want to wear anything to say, oh, I do jujitsu, because then I don't want someone, because jujitsu is growing in popularity with MMA growing in popularity. I don't want somebody then to say, oh, this. Well, and then they try to, make a point, because you do have dummies who don't train, who think they need to prove themselves. Well, I could beat you up. I wore my gym's. I had a jacket when I went to a Ravens game last January, and I'm standing in line to go to the bathroom, and this guy's behind me, and he sees that it says Ivy League MMA, where I trained at the time, and he goes, "Oh, you train that MMA shit? I used to train that shit too." And it's like, as soon as you say shit, that shit, it's like, no, you don't. No, you haven't. You probably went to a trial class with a buddy. You got humbled, and you're like, this ain't for me. Like, this shit is dumb anyway. They humping on the ground. They don't know how to fight. I'm a fighter. I'll knock somebody out. No, you didn't. No, you won't. So now I've gotten to the point where it's like, I go out. I don't want to wear anything that says I train. Just want to go out and just be me. And I wore a BJJ Wiki shirt out to the bar a few weeks back, and the bartender saw it. He goes, "Oh, you train?" We had a good conversation. So, those are times I do want to wear the shirt out to engage in that type of interaction. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want any negative blowback from it either, which I've only had 2 instances where somebody said something shitty. And, they just kind of walked. I was like, I don't have to prove myself. And my wife, she, love her to death. When we went to the county fair last week, and she was like, give me one of your BJJ Wiki shirts. I'm going to wear that to the fair. I was like, all right, look at you promoting me and shit. And then I put on the X-Men shirt. She was like, we're not going to match. I was like, we've been together for 22 years. You think I'm going to start matching today? Get out of here. My daughter put on a fucking Green Lantern shirt. So it's like, meanwhile, the person who doesn't train jiu-jitsu is wearing a jiu-jitsu shirt. And, the other 2 are like, yeah, let's put on some fucking comic book shit. Let's be nerds.
Dude, it's funny. My wife, and she's been extremely supportive of everything I've been doing with jiu-jitsu. And arguably, I could not be where I'm at with, losing 115 pounds if it wasn't for her support, right? And she's like, she doesn't train. She trained, she did like a week or 2, and then she got hurt. She had like an intercostal muscle thing where basically like a herniated rib. And that pretty much set her from not wanting to train anymore. And she's just like, she's not a very sweaty, sticky person. She doesn't like, sweat dripping in her face and all that. Meanwhile, I'm just like over here, like diving face into it. I've got a shaved head. So like, to me, I'm like, I do this little shift like that with my head, and like all of a sudden it just goes everywhere. But she loves wearing my stuff. When we go to tournaments, my daughter, she competes too. And so she definitely loves wearing the Carlson Gracie shirts, and she likes wearing it. And it's cool because she was actually out, and someone's like, "Oh, you're part of Carlson Gracie team." She's like, "Oh no, my husband and my daughter are. I just support them." And supporting is like an understatement. Like I said, man, it's just being able to train 6 days a week. It takes a lot from the house to do that, right? Because there's stuff that's going to get neglected if I'm working and then I'm going straight to training, and then she's making dinner, you know what I mean? And the fact that like dinners have shifted because of, like I told you, when I was around 260, my diet kind of shifted to try and count calories. And so she's been very accommodating, man. And Having a good woman back you up is a big deal.
Absolutely. I think, again, in our sport, that's a huge, huge factor, is just having that support system, especially at home, because jiu-jitsu is not normal. Like this is not normal shit. So, even when I talk to my grandparents about it, they look at me like, the fuck is wrong with you, dude? Like, you know, but in your household, with the disruption that it seemingly can be, to have that support under your roof with you, whether it be, you know you have people over and you're watching matches,
Mhm.
or you're gonna go out and drill. My neighbor, he came and did a trial with me. Was it during, like, after we reopened after COVID? He came over and did a trial. So, he'll come over and watch UFC cards with me, and we'll get to talking about grappling and stuff. And I have the puzzle mats downstairs, so we might do some demonstrations on each other there. But having you know your spouse understanding and supporting that, versus saying it's an inconvenience or it's weird,
Mhm.
because that has been a thing too, not for myself personally, but I've known people to encounter that, where their spouse would rather them not train as much, and it's like, I almost quit, and my wife told me, no, you can't quit. Like, she noticed a shift in just my mindset, and
Bro, it's real, man. Like your mindset, and like you get cranky. Like that Saturday I don't train is the
Mhm.
crankiest I am all week. But I'm like, I know my body needs a rest, you know.
Yeah.
And then it's funny, like too, like from a support standpoint, my mom, uh, when she knew I started training, she remembers when I wrestled in high school. I'd be like, "Hey, mom, I want to show you this move," and I'd be like, "So this is a half Nelson," I would do whatever. And then like she asked my wife, she's like, "So is Josh trying to do all these moves?" And she's like, "Yes, he's trying to freaking show me a wrist lock." And I'm like, "Ow, stop that shit!" It's like she becomes my at-home uke. I'm like, "Okay, here's what we learned: Kiss of the Dragon." No, so it's like she like tries to run away from me sometimes when I'm like, "Hey, I just want to show you this move. It won't hurt. It won't hurt. It won't hurt. I promise." And then 2 minutes later, ow.
Like, I tried to get my wife, she and I have talked about her coming to train, and she's got some um hesitancies with training, and I understand and respect them completely. So I told her, I was like, look, you can come there and train, and you can work with me. Like, I'm gonna take care of you. I'm not gonna let you get hurt. I'm more scared of you than you are of me. Trust me. Like, it's always the new white belts. Like, I don't want to hurt anyone. Trust me, I
Mhm.
don't want you to hurt me either. But you're more likely to hurt me than I am to hurt you. So
Yeah.
I'm prepared. But the thing is, just having that love and that support, and the understanding, because without that understanding, without that support, it can be lonely, and you know damaging to your psyche, because like Chris Rock had a joke when he's talking about Whitney Houston, Bobby Brown smoking crack. And it was like, you got to have common interest. You can't be like, what are you doing today, honey? Oh, I'm going to church. What are you going to do? I'm going to hit the pipe. you know
Right.
so or at the very least, if you don't have, the common interest, at least support. Because if I'm out here doing jujitsu and my wife is like, jujitsu again, that does weigh on your mind. And you either lean heavy into it and then fracture your relationship at home, or you keep the relationship at home, you fracture your relationship with training, and then, there may be some small resentment as to you're not training, but you're not training because you want to be here. So, having that support at home is amazing, and just, you know, it can't be, topped.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing about it is, so she was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and then I worked from home for a long time. So we were basically like, we spent all the time together. And so being able to go out and train, she's like, thank God I get my house to myself. So that's like a nice thing too, is the fact that, it does allow us both to kind of have like that separate, which has been great for, I think, the relationship part of it too, is that, sometimes, being in the same room in the same house for too long can kind of drive people stir crazy. So it's nice. And then obviously, weight loss is a big benefit for both of us. And then just in general, it gives me something to, kind of talk about. And then for my daughter and I, my daughter started training shortly after I did. And she there's two ways I want to talk about this, but like, when I first wanted her to get going into jiu-jitsu, we have my coach, he has like a really great kids program, and there's a really good women's program too. And so I wanted her to be a part of the kids program. And I asked her, she was doing soccer at the time, and she was really timid in soccer. And she would do the thing where she wouldn't want to like go and interject and take the ball from somebody. And I'm like, she just needs to have that more physical contact. So I said, hey, I want you to promise me 3 classes. And after your 3rd class, we can decide whether or not you want to stay. And then she's like, okay. So my daughter agreed to it. And then ironically, the biggest thing she was afraid of was doing forward rolls. She didn't like the warm-ups. She wasn't afraid of rolling. She wasn't afraid of choking. She was like, I don't know how to do a forward roll, and I don't want to be embarrassed in front of everybody. So the first day, she's crying. She's just in total tears. Doesn't want to go. And I'm basically like, no, you made a promise. You got to go. And I didn't make it about like, I want you to do this. Like, I want you to keep your promise, was kind of more or less the parenting angle I took on it. And so at the end of the first class, immediately I asked her in a way to make her say it wasn't bad. I said, how was it? She goes, oh, it's okay. And I go, you want to go tomorrow? And she's like, we'll see. And that to me, I was like, she didn't say no. So then the second day, she had her gi on. She was asking, how do I tie my belt? I was like, okay. Then the 3rd day, she was knocking on my office door 20 minutes before going. She's like, Dad, we got to go to jiu-jitsu. Come on. 100% wanted to go, And so she's been doing it ever since. And so, the fact that now she does it and I do it, it gives us a good car ride there. And so my daughter and I, we have like a bond. Now, we've always had a really strong bond. There's never been, a gap there. But how much stronger it's gotten, because now we have this alone time in the car together. We now have alone time, going to the jiu-jitsu and back. We talk about jiu-jitsu. We talk about moves. And then the other day after class, like I snuck up behind her and I went to go do like a rear naked choke, and she gets out of it. And she comes and she does like a Uchimata throw on me. And like I hit the ground, and then she gets side control, and then she fucking armbarred me. And I wasn't even expecting it. She's 11. She's this little kid. And I was just like kind of playfully like, oh, she's at side control. Dude, she does like this chewy fucking armbar where she like sits up, throws me down, puts her fucking leg over my throat. And I was like, oh my God, my daughter's going to fucking break my arm right now. Like I was not expecting. And I'm like, how fucking cool is that? So the fact that, our coaches like created such an awesome environment for that. And the fact that everyone in our school, Carlson Gracie in general, I've noticed is just very much like this, where our school specifically is a lot of families, and either the kids get into it and the parents do, or the parents get into it and the kids do. And it's usually not like one or the other. Like usually if someone's got kids, they're training. And if the kids are there, the parents are probably training. So, or in some capacity, they're involved. And it's really awesome to see, like, they've got a huge amount of kids, man. It's so great to see that for the future of the sport too. If you think about jiu-jitsu, and again, I just didn't know what the sport was up until 2 years ago, but I've done a lot of reading and YouTube watching, and I'm like immersed in it. When I'm not on the mats, I'm off the mats doing something else, right? And I'm trying to like learn more about the sport and how male dominated it was, and the fact that females are really getting into the sport, like you said, Danielle Kelly, and you've got Kendall, and you've got all these really talented names, Mackenzie Dern, all these females that are like out there representing the sport, doing well. And now you've got these kids coming up, and the difference now is that 20 years ago, back when it was really heavily male dominated, to 10 years ago, where you started seeing the shift in gender, our class, man, is like 50-50, right? And you see, not only do you have a good representation of both, but now the education that's out there. One of our black belts was talking about it this weekend at ADCC, how he said when he started the sport, you basically had Carlson Gracie teams, you had like a checkmat team, you had all these different teams, and they all had their different styles, and they would go compete. And you had these move sets which belonged to Gracie Baja, these move sets that belonged to, you know, John Smith Jiu-Jitsu, whatever. And you had these lineages that had their move sets. But now, because of YouTube fundamentals, and you've got BJJ Fanatics and Gordon Ryan doing his stuff, you've got all these DVDs out there where everyone says, this is the best way to open the close guard. This is the best way to do a triangle choke. And you now have all these coaches that go, okay, I was taught this way, but I'm seeing at the top levels, this is how it's done. And this is who taught it to them. And this is the instructional. So now you have all these kids that are coming up and they're getting amazing jujitsu that people that have been in the sport for 20 years are trying to break bad habits and stuff. So it's such a cool thing to see that for the future of the sport is obviously back to Whitney Houston. I believe the children are the future. But if you teach them well and let them lead the way to jiu-jitsu, you know, they will they're gonna know how to do an armbar way better than we'll ever learn. Yeah. So it's really cool to see that for the younger ones.
I feel like when you look at the comparison of where jiu-jitsu was 10 years ago compared to today, even when my teammate and I, we sat there and we did an episode on here. I believe it was the 1 year anniversary episode on here. We sat and we watched the first few UFC cards, and we're looking at the jiu-jitsu then that Royce Gracie was utilizing. And granted, it's a little bit different because it's an MMA setting now. He's still in his gi, you know, but there's like opportunities of certain points where it's like, that doesn't look like he's got good pressure there. You know, he doesn't have good control there, you know, and you know, he ends up going to something else and getting a different choke or something. And it's like, when you look at what was jiu-jitsu back in 93, when we first all got introduced to it, or, you know, even just 90s period, and there's a lot of stuff that kids are learning now, like in intro classes, or, you know, within their first 6 months, that, you know, 15, 20 years ago would have been, you know, considered, you know, that high level, you know, training that, you know, you're not ready for this yet. Whereas now we're, you know, throwing kids into the pool and they're learning to swim very quickly. Even, you know, now when, you know, I go in and train, you know, we get some of the white belts in there and it's like, holy shit, you know, they're learning this stuff. I didn't get to learn this stuff until about a year, you know, into it. And these kids are, you know, coming in. This is, you know, our Wednesday morning class that they're learning, you know, these escapes or specific submissions. And, you know, heaven, you know, forbid if it's a blue belt dominated class that day, coach is going over wrist locks for some sadistic reason. You know, he'll ask, like, what do you guys want to learn? You want to learn cool shit, or do you want to learn, you know, the curriculum shit? It's like, oh, it's all blue belts in here today. Let's go with the cool shit. And somehow cool shit turns to wrist locks. And I'm like, fuck. Like,
dude, the first wrist lock I ever pulled off was in a fucking tournament because I don't want to wrist lock my teammates, right? And so I'm in this tournament and I'm already up like 11-0, and it was at the IBJJF in San Diego. And I'm sitting there and I'm kind of like got this guy and like I'm trying to work a Kimura, and I hear my coach yell out, I want you to get a submission. You've got 10 seconds left. And I'm sitting there and I have the Kimura set up, but he's like fighting it really hard. And I see the wrist just dangling there. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. And I looked at him and I like looked him straight in his eyes. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, but my coach says he wants a submission. And I fucking wrist locked him. He's like, tap, 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 tap. And it was 1 second left. And I got the wrist lock. It was the first one I've ever done. And I don't think I've really done one since. But like, I feel like it's like such a tough move to like do friendly. You know, it's like that in the Ezekiel.
There's no friendly wrist locks out there. Even with my one teammate, he doesn't typically train on Wednesday morning. So he and I, you know, we get together and while we're rolling, you know, he's motioning towards it. And, you know, later on he texts me. He's like, dude, I would never wrist lock you. I was like, I know you won't, but, you know, and I'm always prepared for the wrist lock. I think Last time I got wrist lock was by my coach, and I got lazy. Yeah, I just got lazy and confident. Like, he's not going to go for the wrist lock. And sure enough, he goes for it. And later on that day, he sends me a text message. It's a picture of an arm being x-rayed and the wrist is circled. I was like, how's your wrist doing? And then he went and posted on Facebook and told everybody he wrist locked me. And it's just like, fuck, dude. That now it's like that set me back. I had a good streak of 2 years not getting wrist lock, and get one wrist lock once, and now all of a sudden you're known as the guy who gets wrist locked. It's like, fuck. Like why me? But wrist locks are just they're those upper body equalizers. It's like, and then the fucked up thing is you're up 11-0. That's just insult to injury.
I feel bad for the guy, man. Like, he was a really nice guy, and we're like friends on Instagram now. And like, I felt bad, but it's like my coach was there, and I even said to him, he's like, "No, we do wrist locks at my school all the time." He's like, "I should have guarded it better." I was like, I just felt bad, man. Like, that was just like, his elbow was so tight to his body, he couldn't get it out. The first time I ever got wrist locked was by a black belt, and I had him in my half guard, and I grabbed his lapel kind of around like the pec area, and I wasn't even thinking. All of a sudden, he just drops his body weight and grabs my elbow and wrist locked the shit out of it. And I didn't even know wrist. I was probably a month and a half in. And I was like, what the fuck was that? Dude, I couldn't wipe my ass for a fucking week. Like, I was with my left hand. I was like, it hurt so bad. I was just like, I can't get it back there. So I was like, good thing I have a bidet. But no, wrist locks, man. I was like, I got to make sure I do it to someone's non-dominant ass wiping hand if I'm ever gonna fucking wrist lock somebody.
Of course, at least if you're trying to be nice about it,
Right?
We had several. I don't say several, but we had a few police officers training with us, and I was still early on, so I didn't know nothing. I remember we had this police chief. We called him Chief, as a matter of fact. He's an older guy, and I remember coming in, I was just all athleticism. It was just fast, I'm strong, and I was giving him headaches. And one day he broke out the secret weapon, the wrist lock. And it wasn't even like he did it once. We rolled, this was probably a 4-minute roll. He had to have hit 5-6 wrist locks on me. Jesus. You would have thought I would have learned, but no, I didn't. I was dumb. And he just kept wrist locking me. Now, from that point on, he didn't get another wrist lock on me, but he was cool about it. He, it wasn't like he like slammed it on there. It was kind of like, it was just, I have weak wrist anyway. So it was just enough to let me know that he's in charge. And then we had a training session with one of our affiliate gyms at the time, and one of their blue belts. He and I are rolling. And again, I'm not thinking about wrist locks. I don't even think it's a real thing, to be honest. And this dude wrist locked me, and it was not friendly. And I remember I held such a grudge against him. And once he started following me on Instagram, and he liked a few, like he followed my personal Instagram, and like family stuff, and then he posted something I like it. So it was like, okay, maybe he's not that bad of a guy, but I'm not gonna ever fucking forget he wrist locked me. And it wasn't even like he didn't give me I was a white belt, so I'm sure he just looks like, oh, fresh meat. Fucking wrist locked me. Is like, serves you right, bitch. And I'm sitting there questioning my own life now. I go home and I'm sitting there thinking, it's like, is this for me? Maybe I need to go take up badminton or something.
Dude, so wrist locks almost did you in.
Yeah, wrist locks.
Dude, that's fucking wild.
No, because the way that he wrist locked me, because he's a competition blue belt, so he's in it to win it. And I'm just a hobbyist. He hit that wrist lock. I thought it was the end. I was like, fuck this. I think I'm done. I might not come back.
So I gotta ask, so at your gym, or maybe it's just the affiliate, are the blue belts allowed to wrist lock white belts?
Oh yeah.
Oh, see, my coach is like, he's like, as long as you're a white belt with no stripes, you can't get ankle locked. You can't get a straight ankle locked or toe hold, and you can't be knee barred, and you can't be wrist locked. Then once you get your first stripe, he allows straight foot locks, but still no knee bars, toe holds, or wrist locks. And so I'm rolling with because I'm a blue belt, and so I'm rolling with like white belts and stuff, and I'm like, they're like maybe like in a dominant spot, but then they're being like super lazy with watching the wrist lock, and I'm like,
Yep.
God, I want to fucking wrist lock this guy right now. I was like, I know it'll fucking get me out of this position. I was like, but I got to find another way. So it's actually good for me because I'm not relying on wrist locks. Like I'm actually having to find other avenues to get out of like other positions and stuff.
So for us, wrist locks are on the table. Ankle locks are not for the white belts. And I think, well, in our fundamentals and mixed levels classes, the ankle locks are off the table. Now, if it's after class and it's a couple blue belts rolling, that's fine. Heel hooks and a gi we don't allow, but wrist locks across the table, all across the board. You can wrist lock anyone. Now, I don't. Oh yeah, because there was one of the white belts. He tried to wrist lock me. I was like, I don't know if the white belts can, but yeah, they can. Because this one little bastard, he was a little scrawny fella, nice kid. He kept trying to wrist lock me, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing? And then he went for it. He was like, stop trying to be a villain. He was like, I can't remember what he said, but I was like, dude, this is not cool. And then I went to visit another gym out in Virginia, and I had a body triangle on the kid, and he tried to wrist lock me while I had his back, and I was like, dude, don't be a bad guy. I was like, you're the one with the body triangle. Who's really being the bad guy? I was like, all right, I guess you're right, but now I got to figure out like not let this kid wrist lock me. But it's all in good fun. Nobody means no one no harm as far as I know. So
yeah, you should hear. Do you follow Pete the Greek?
Oh yeah,
wrist lock the
actually,
world.
Pete the Greek, one of my teammates went up there because my teammate, he's from Chicago originally. He went back home to visit, and he went over and trained with Pete, and he learned a couple of different wrist locks and brought those back here and tried to do them on me. And then I went and messaged Pete and was like, dude, like, what the fuck? Like, you're teaching my teammates wrist locks and they're bringing them back home.
He like throws on his Instagram. He's like, advertisement, yes, please.
Yeah. And then like I said that, and he just goes, wrist lock the world. I was like, I mean, you're right, but still, don't be sending people back with that shit. Like, dude, it's bad enough the dude already kicks my ass, and now you're sending him back with wrist locks.
Dude, that's funny, man. Yeah, we have heel hooks are another one that are like, we don't obviously do heel hooks in the gi. Our school pretty much follows IBJJF rules. We're not a huge competition school necessarily. Like, we've got some folks that like to compete, but our coach just tries to really follow the IBJJF rules, and it makes the most sense. And so we so we don't allow heel hooks in the gi, but like I got a buddy and he's really like in a heel hook mindset right now. And so even though we're in the gi, he was like heel hooking me last week at Open Mat. And I'm like sitting there looking at him, and he's looking at me, and we're just kind of like, it's like two people in the Wild West, like willing to draw guns, and he's just like, ooh, wow, wow, wow. And then like, he's just like going, I got your heel. I'm like, we're in the fucking gi, don't you goddamn do it. But so then we rolled tonight. So my school, we do 2 weeks of gi and then 2 weeks of no gi, which is kind of interesting. A lot of schools, I don't think, do that. And the reason our coach likes to do that, and it makes a lot of sense to me, is that when you're doing gi like 4 days a week and then you do 1 day no gi, how well can you really retain that 1 day of no gi lesson over the course of 4 weeks, right? You're getting 4 hours of training over the course of a month for no gi, and then everything else is all gi. So it really gets washed out. So for consistency's sake of being able to learn both, he showcases both 2 weeks at a time. So right now we're kind of in a no gi or in a gi session, even though we came back from ADCC and we're both kind of chomping at the bits to do some no gi. So we took our gi tops off tonight. We rolled no gi, and he fucking heel hooked me like 4 times. I'm like, fuck. It's just like, he's like super athletic and he's just really good. And so it was just kind of funny because I really haven't picked up any of the ankle attacks yet. Like I've kind of avoided that until now. I'm starting to now kind of dive into that. Um, so I think as of maybe the last 3 weeks, I started focusing because when I do a lot of my training, I take one training thing that I'm looking at, like it's a mount system or deep half or half guard, whatever it may be, and I will train it for like 3 or 4 months, and like that's kind of I'm just super dedicated to one thing I'm trying to do. And yeah, you'll have the moves that we try, and maybe I'll try and drop it in during a roll or something from class. Um, but what I'm really trying to do is just kind of hone in on one system at a time. And then that way I kind of like solidifies in my brain. So I'm shifting away from, I think, the mount system because I've been doing that for about 3 months now. And I'm going to see if I can try and get in heel hook or leg attacks, just leg injuries in general.
Yeah, with one of my teammates, he and I, we're good friends. It's the same guy who was like, "I'll never wrist lock you," and I was like, "I know." I remember I come back to train. I had been training for a while. He and I, we get into a scramble. We end up in 50-50. He has my leg and he's going for a straight ankle lock. And I've got his leg and I'm positioned for a heel hook. And we're just sitting there, eye contact. We're looking at each other, seeing who's gonna go first. And we're in a gi. So he knows I'm not gonna heel hook him. And he, we continue to stare. And I kind of posture like I tighten up a little bit. And then he was like, "Okay, you know what? Fuck this. Let me go first." And I tapped, and it was like heel hooks and heel hook in the gi. Now I was like, I wasn't gonna heel hook you, dude. It was like, I know. That's why I ankle locked. And I was like, okay, fair enough. like, you beat me to it, and you call my bluff because like we're not allowed to do it. You get caught doing it. I don't. Like you get yelled at. I don't think. I always wonder. It's like I'm just gonna do it. What's worse is gonna happen? Oh, he'll yell at me, and then I'll probably get my ass kicked by coach. And then you have to ask yourself, maybe I liked it. I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna do it again now.
I see you like descending into like the villain territory right now. You're like, I hate wrist locks, but I'm gonna heel hook the shit out of someone in the gi.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like wrist locks. I don't because I have super sensitive wrists. So if you even like right now, my wrist hurts as is. I should just tape it up. But it's like you look at my wrist and I'm like, oh shit, I should tap. But then because I'm so spiteful, I'm like, fuck this. I'm gonna heel hook somebody. It's like, where's that 6-year-old? And it's like, it's a little kid. He's just like, what did I do? What did I do? Well, you heel faster. That's what you do. Come here.
I'm gonna try and find as many dainty wrist memes as possible, and I'm just gonna be sending them to you. BJJ Wiki and his dainty wrists.
I'll just be sitting there like spazzing out. I was like, what's wrong with you? Like, no, not another one. No more.
I'm just gonna like create a bunch of Instagram accounts and just like send them to you from all over. You're just gonna get like flooded with dainty wrist memes.
You know what? It's better than some of the shit that I get. I get like, I think people really, truly, genuinely think I'm affected by them bullying me. It's like, dude, it's the internet. You can say my content's trash, but guess what? You just gave me a follow. So thanks, dickhead. Someone like I had a bunch of nasty comments earlier today on a post. I was just like, okay, well, you have to follow me in order to comment. That's I have that setting on. So as soon as I saw the shitty comments, I was like, thanks for the follow, assholes.
Right.
Like, and most people forget to unfollow. So it's like, I'm just gonna keep those follows. And I'm gonna have to wrap us up very soon because Josh, this has been fucking great. Like,
thanks, man.
Like talking with you is like talking with an old friend. That like I'm starting to find that lately. Like these Instagram connections. It's like we all have a lot more in common besides just jiu-jitsu. It's like just the humanism of it all.
Yeah, I think there's like I want to say it's funny because the way I look at it, man, is like you've got like all these different personality archetypes, but when you do find people in jiu-jitsu, it kind of weeds out a lot of the shittier ones. Like, yeah, there's a couple that stick around for a little bit, but I remember there's this guy, man, and he was just kind of a bully because I was like really heavy. Like he used to call me out on it. He's not around anymore. And then, you still run into that now and then. Like I was rolling with this guy and, after we're done, he's like, well, there's not much I can do against fat. And I'm like, bro, at the time I was like 240. And I was like, you did just fine against me when I was 350. I go, what's the excuse now other than I've gotten better? He's like, well, it's just you're a big guy. And I'm like, I get that. But you did just fine when I was bigger. And it's just like, and it hurts, and there's this lady, and she's at my school, and she started and she was just under 300 pounds. And she's lost about 45 pounds now. And she was rolling with someone the other day, and they were just kind of giving her a shitty attitude. And she's like, I don't want to give people all my weight. And I don't want to give people, I don't want to hurt my training partners. And there's kind of this thing where you're like a big person, right? But the lighter people aren't afraid to go fast on you, right? The lighter people aren't afraid to really get their skinny ass arms underneath your neck and choke the shit out of you. They don't realize that, like, hey, you've got a big ass arm. It's a lot harder to try and grind under that chin. It doesn't slip in there as easy. And so for the bigger folks that are rolling, there's an intimidation factor of when you walk in, you're like, I just don't want to squash people, and I feel uncomfortable, and I'm out of shape, and I'm out of breath. And there's a part of it where some bigger guys told me, like, don't hold back because it's going to fuck up your jiu-jitsu down the road. But then you run into these bullies and you feel like you have to hold back because you're like, well, man, he just called me fat. And, and again, I don't think those people really stay around very long. But my thought now is like, I'm not holding back. Like, I'm going to use my weight. And if you can't handle my pressure, then you need to get better. And I know that's kind of an arrogant thing to say, but that's what we're here for, is to make each other better. And if my pressure is big on you and you expect to go to a bar and use jiu-jitsu, what are you going to do? Not pick the fight with a guy that's 240 because you're afraid he might have too good of pressure. If you're using it in a real world scenario, you need to have real world pressure. And so I actually told her, I said, I'm going to get back to you on my response to her, because it's like, I'm still trying to think, like, I don't want her to hurt anybody. Right. But at the same time, I really think that for the bigger folks that are rolling and they kind of struggle with the weight loss and they're struggling with finding partners to roll with, because I'll tell you, man, I've looked at people in the eyes. I'm like, hey, want to roll? They go, look at me up and down. And they go, not today. And it's like, I get it. Right. I'm not expecting 110-pound guys to want to roll with me. And even if you're 180, like, that's still a big difference, right? Weight classes exist for a reason. So I do have to respect that. But at the same time, if you do agree to roll with me and you want me to hold back or something, say it. But if you're going to go fast and spazzy and fucking try and fly an armbar me because you're 135 pounds, I'm going to try and smash the shit out of you. It's only fair. I have to match my speed against, or your speed against my brawn. And again, I think it just makes us better. But it's just, back to what you're talking about of, like, I think jiu-jitsu is full of a lot of good people. And I do think the shitty ones kind of fall away at some point. Like, I don't think they stick with it at the highest levels. And if they do stick with the highest level, I think they've been humbled and they've changed their personality. I know a lot of people who've said that has happened to them, where they're like, I was an asshole when I started.
I think with that, like you say, you got to play to your strengths, whether you got to use your brawn or your speed, whatever it may be, you got to work to what's going to work in your advantage. And also, one thing that I like to always think about, and especially, the people leaving nasty comments on one of my posts earlier, the thing that frustrates me is, like, this person that I reposted, she's always been getting attacked by people. For whatever reason, people attack her. I don't know, maybe she's been shitty to them. I don't know. Maybe she's been shitty to people and they see her post and they get angry. I don't know. Regardless, though, they can fuck off. But the one thing I always think about, and Joe Rogan has said this, is like, who doesn't talk shit to people? Winners. Only people who were, losers and have no direction are ones on social media talking shit. And of course, for the people who had something shit to say, I went and looked. Oh, look at that. You have 300 followers. And I know that's not an indicator of anything, but it's like, you have 500 posts, 300 followers, and you're following 1,000 people. Okay. Or my favorite one, the blank screen, the blank profile picture. They follow a bunch of people, no followers, no posts. Oh, so this is a troll account. Okay.
Right.
That's really, really cute. So It's like, in this community, we run into a lot of, adversity. And for those that, embrace that and face it head on, you know, those are the individuals that stick around versus the ones who say, well, I can't go against you because, you're bigger than me. You're making excuses, and chances are you're not going to stick around long because you're making excuses. Everything's an excuse why you can't roll with somebody. Then why are you even there on the mats with them? So,
Yeah, it's tough because I mean, like I said, I don't want to be disrespectful to somebody and be like, "Hey, you have to roll with me." Like, no one's entitled. I'm not entitled to that. No one's entitled to roll with me, right? They're not forced to. And there's days, man, where I was in class and I was in my heavier, and I would leave in tears because I sat on the wall and people told me no, and I still had to fucking come back and figure it out. And thankfully, I had some key people that I really like training with, and they were higher belts. They're purple, brown at the time, and they would, doesn't matter whether they're 150 pounds, they would work my ass, and they would always train with me if they were there. So I really had that to rely on, which I think helped me get into, because I like to compete a lot. And so that really got me into the more of the competition set because they were beating my ass up. I'm like, well, if I can survive 6 minutes with this guy, I can go survive 6 minutes in a competition with someone else at my skill level. So it really helped me actually get more into a competition mind. And then another part of that too is that they knew I was there to try and get myself better, right? So they were really willing to help out, and they were also skilled enough to not allow me to hurt them. And if they even had a day like, hey man, my knee's jacked today, let's just start on the knees, right? Okay, cool, whatever. They always say, if you ever get hurt, it's your own fault, right? If you are doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're doing stuff and you're not being all wackadoo, if you get hurt, it's on you. Unless somebody just goes out and they just fucking punch you for some shit, you know what I mean? But generally, like, if you're hurt, and that was something that was really drilled in my head, was that I would sometimes have a victim mentality when I first started. Like, I'd be like, oh, this guy really fucking hurt my elbow, man, and he tweaked it wrong. They're like, should have been in that position, man. And I'm like, no, but you're not listening. I was here, and they're like, dude, I don't care. That's on you. Where should your elbow have fucking been? And I'm like, well, on the inside, but I was trying to. Enough, but I was trying. And that's been a big evolution for me, is like the accountability, not only for my weight, but also for how I roll and how I treat myself and my training partners. There's an accountability there that I've picked up over the last few years that's really changed who I am. So for me, anyways, it's just trying to go back to the bullying part, is like, there's the internet bullies, right? Where they will message you and like, hey dude, you look fucking fat, or hey, your content's trash, or whatever. I'm sure you're probably getting bullies from all different angles or whatever. But like Tom DeBlas says, show up at my gym. Where are you at?
yeah.
Here's my gym address, right? And then you have like the guys in the class who will be like, man, you're just too fucking fat, and they just say it, and then you're like, sorry, I'm trying. And then I said that to a guy like about a week and a half ago, actually. He rolled with me 3 months ago. He got really upset, and he almost looked like he wanted to fight me. And I was just giving him the juice. You know what I mean? And afterwards, he was really mad. He didn't want to shake my hands, and I go up to him in the corner. I'm like, shake my hand. And he shakes my hand. I go, there's no hate here, man. We're just rolling. And then he was like, yeah, but you're just a big guy. And he goes, and he's a skinnier guy, and he's a higher belt than me, but like, I was giving him sauce, and I was just trying to match energy because he's somebody who I really respect. And I upset him, and he's just saying, hey, and then finally a couple of days later, he's like, hey man, that wasn't on you, that was on me. And that accountability part came in, right? Where he was just having a bad day and he was upset. And then, so I rolled with him again about a week and a half ago, and he's like, oh man, he starts laughing. He's like, you really have lost a lot of weight. Your pressure's shit now. I was like, well, dude, last time I tried to roll with you, I said, you wanted to fucking throw down. I said, I felt like a fucking, Oompa Loompa trying to roll with you if you don't want my pressure. I said, so I wasn't giving you pressure tonight. He's like, and you can see the look in his face, man. And I felt bad. But he's like, man, I'm sorry. And it really just like, you had that humanity where I just told him, hey, I felt bad about giving you that pressure before. So I didn't do it again. And he's like, next time, give me the pressure. And so then we rolled last night, and I just drove my shoulder into his fucking face. And he's like, gets out of the roll, and he was like, I see that pressure. So there's no malice, right? It's just, and it goes back to that conversation before where that ego and narcissism kind of takes over sometimes. And if you're having a bad day, it happens. But I think being respectful is important. Watching out for your training partners is obviously important. But I think that if you were to pull your punches on your weight or pull your punches on your speed, you're only going to hurt somebody's training and development and your own. You're going to handicap yourself in the long run. There's a really big guy. He's a purple belt in my school, and he's been training for a while, and he's like kind of been a mentor for me for the big perspective of how to use the power, right? Like I have all these different mentors, man. That's the thing I love about jiu-jitsu is there's so much data to pull from. And he's like, stop being weak. Stop pulling your punches. Stop being light. He goes, make my life miserable. If I don't want to be in a miserable spot, I will get out of it. I will find a way. He goes, but I'm comfortable here. You're not going to be giving me this pressure in a tournament, are you? Because if you are, you're going to fucking lose. And so he's just like, make my life miserable. And then like, I'll make his life miserable, finger quotes. And then he always lets out like a groan of like satisfaction, like, oh, that's the stuff, So he's an awesome guy, man. And so it's like having all these different people to kind of help forge me. I'm really a product of everybody in my school, man. It's just such a good environment. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing there too, is being, in a positive environment, a great group, because like I say, you are a product of that environment. If you all are building off of each other and growing off of each other, it's going to show in your rolling. It's going to show in the leadership that's, passed on to you, from, those higher ranks and your coaches even as well. We have he's lost quite a bit of weight now. It's funny. He's lost a lot of weight and I've gained a lot of weight. So we've kind of flip-flopped.
You found it.
Wow. I remember early on with him rolling, we got one guy specifically that would always complain about that guy being bigger than him. And that's, you're just big. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like that's no excuse now, because now he's technical and he's good. What's your excuse now? He's lost a lot of weight. You still can't match him. And the funny thing is, though, he, would say that about him. Oh, well, you're just big. But then meanwhile, my jiu-jitsu is like, he's gotten better than me. This guy who's complaining, when he rolls with me, I'm much bigger than him. I don't hear him complaining there.
Right.
When he's inverted and rolling around underneath me, I don't hear no complaints. Well, every so often he'll invert and it gets kind of annoying. So I'll like drop a knee into his like chest. I'm like, okay, you got to stop, dude. Like, you're moving too fast. I just can't keep up. So I got to pin you right here for a second.
I'm sorry. I mean, go
ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so, what it makes me think of is like, there's this brown belt who is a big guy also, and he's just like super athletic. And he trains now down in an area elsewhere because he lives on base. He's a Marine. And for me, like, he's always been a guy who would pick me out of the crowd and be like, come on, let's roll. Come on, let's roll. And he's a ultra heavy and super heavy. Like, he's right around that 208, 215 area. And so he can fluctuate in either classes for competing, but he wanted my weight. Like, he wanted it because it makes him better. And so for every guy that turns me down or turned me down, they were generally lower belts and maybe they couldn't handle it, whatever. And that's totally understandable, right? But it allowed me to train with these beasts, right? These really fucking strong guys that are really good. And so who's my jiu-jitsu getting like? Is it getting like the guy who wants to continuously turn me down? Or is it getting my jiu-jitsu like the guys who are taking me on as a challenge and want to fucking use my weight and they want to float me around? And dude, like my game is a bottom game. Like I do a lot of half guard. I do deep half. I was in a tournament and a guy was like, did you just fucking pull deep half on me? And I was like, yeah, man. He's like, I'm fucking 300 pounds. Like, you're deep halfing me? I'm like, It's not a big deal. It's like, it was just funny. So like my game is really evolved from a small guy's game. And my coach, man, he's a smaller guy. Like he's like 160 pounds, like 5'5", I think 5'6", somewhere around there, maybe 5'8". But he's like smaller. And so I've learned a very small guy's game, and I just try and implement it. And then I've rolled with these beasts, man, that like take me in. So if anyone's discouraged that people turn them down, fuck them, right? And I'm sorry, and I don't mean to be curt, but at the end of the day, you're paying a fee, just like everyone else. People have a right to turn you down, right? And that's the thing is, if they're turning you down because they're afraid of getting hurt, totally understandable. If they're turning you down because they're afraid you're going to hurt their ego, that's fine too. But find the people that will roll with you. And then those people that will roll with you are going to be the ones that you want to roll with anyways, because they're going to be the ones to make you better. And so it's just like that guy that you're saying who didn't want to roll with you, man. It's like the same thing of like, you end up finding a spot where you end up kind of surpassing him,
Yeah. It's really a game of was it iron sharpens iron?
Yeah, that's one of our statements that we say all the time is iron sharpens iron.
Like everyone that I've rolled with, whether it be from the beginning, as a white belt, getting murked by a 14-year-old and not understanding why this kid beat me. He's the reason I stayed in jiu-jitsu, because I wanted to get revenge. I never could, because he was just so much fucking better than me. As he continued to grapple and then wrestled in high school and became a state champion. That was just like, fuck. It's not even a mind game of me beating myself. It was just, I went out there with the intent. I tried. The best I got was we got stuck in 50-50. We just sat there and looked at each other. But, growing off of that, or, bringing in new guys and then watching them grow and they, watching them surpass you, or, rolling with, the young lady who's super technical. So now you have to match her technique, instead of trying to like outmuscle her. It's like, okay, well, look, I know I'm stronger than you, but I want to be as technical as you too. So now we're going to match, you're taking in all these things. Like you say, you're a product of your gym, you're a product of your environment and your team. And if you got anyone on the team that's like, well, I can't roll with you because you're too big, it's like, well, you know what? That's your loss, dude. Because, like, look at me as an obstacle. And if
100%
you can't get through this obstacle, what are you going to be like? And let's say, like you said, if you're at a bar, this is a real world situation. You see a big guy and he imposes his will on you. What are you going to do? You're going to say, oh, you're too big for me. I'm going to go ahead and get in my car.
Yeah, dude. So it makes me laugh that you're just talking about that. There's this kid at my school and his name's Jose. He's like 15. He's a green belt and he's been training since I think he was like 5. Like he's basically been on the mats longer than most black belt or some black belts. Right. And so he's just a beast and he's a wrestler and he's like 120 pounds, like super light, literally half my weight. Right. And so I'm rolling with this kid or this guy that comes in and it's always the question of when, I roll with them, they go, how heavy are you? Right. That was the question I would get. And I go, doesn't matter. Right. Like I'll answer the question. I'll be like, oh, 240 at the time or 245. And I go, but it doesn't matter. I go, watch. And so I call Jose over and I go, Jose, let's roll. And he's obviously this like petite high school teenager kid, like freshman. Right. And, so he rolls with me. He just dominates me, kicks my ass. And as I'm like underneath and he's got pressure on me, he's choking the shit out of me. I'm looking at that guy who asked, like, how heavy even are you? And I'm like, he's not asking that question, and Jose's just laughing, man. And he's just kicking my ass. And it's great because, I mean, if anything's a reason to get your kids into jiu-jitsu, I mean, it's stories like kids like Jose that can fucking 14, 15 years old, take down a grown ass man. And that was just, dude, that was like a month ago. It wasn't even that long ago, maybe 2 months ago. Like I knew jiu-jitsu and he still fucking took me down. He just knew more jiu-jitsu and better jiu-jitsu. So it's cool.
That's the beauty of it is, especially when you get these kids and you watch them they're just prodigies, and they're growing and they're learning, and their bodies are growing into jiu-jitsu. So as
Yes.
they're developing in a way where they're accustomed to jiu-jitsu. Whereas, us, we're older. It's like, okay, I don't know that I can bolo, but I'm going to learn.
Right.
And meanwhile, like my daughter, one of my teammates, he made a point, and then I watched my daughter one day. Naturally, a lot of our movements as children are a lot of jiu-jitsu movements. Like when kids stand up, they do combat stand-ups. I remember watching my daughter. She's never seen me do this. She's never seen me do a combat stand-up, but I will watch her get up off the floor, and it was a combat stand-up. I was like, holy shit, he's right. You know, um, like she would Granby just for funsies. She's laying on the floor. She just Granby. It's like, okay. And it's a lot of this stuff we unlearn as we grow up. And it's not even that we
Right.
unlearn it. It's just like we don't do it often enough where it's something that's hardwired into our system. Whereas, like even now when I get up off the floor, yeah, it's a Granby stand up. I don't like, mosey to my knees and then like groan. It's just like just a Granby stand up. I was changing a tire and I got up off the ground, and my wife was like, "Why did you get up that way?" I was like, "What are you fucking talking about? Get up what way?" And then I realized, like, oh, it's hardwired into me now. And then I see my daughter do it. It's like, oh, it was already there. It's just we lose it because for whatever reason, whether we, you know, I can't imagine somebody on a football field go out there, make a tackle, and then they stand up by doing a Granby stand up. That'd be a
Right.
little weird, but you know, it's along that path that we kind of lose ourselves when we start playing other sports. So,
Well, even if you think about grips, man, like remember when your daughter was like an infant and she would like grab something and her grip strength was just
oh my
fucking
god,
ridiculous, right? It's like,
yeah,
so I'm a hairy dude, and like my daughter, like when I was really little, like she could probably hold herself on my chest hair. Like it was like monkey strength, dude. And it was just like, and now I think about like grip strength now, like, man, if I only had the grip strength of a baby, like I could probably fucking do a lot better jujitsu, you know?
all right. So we've been recording for a while, my friend.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
this has been
sorry.
fun. No, 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 it's good. That's all the best episodes end up turning to like, look, man, we should wrap up now, and then we go for another 45. It's like, just kidding. So let's go ahead and wrap up. I want to do this again though. This was
Okay.
a lot of fun. So and plus before we even recorded, we talked for another hour's worth of podcasts. So like even all that conversation was like, dude, like we're all over the place. So Josh, thank you for doing this. Before we get out of here, do you have any shout outs or mentions you want to throw out?
Yeah. So definitely want to thank, and I know we mentioned it earlier, but my wife and daughter, like to me, my wife's support and the fact that my daughter does this with me and she took the brave steps to get on the mats is a huge deal. My parents, my dad comes out to all my competitions. We've had a huge bond through jujitsu. He doesn't do jujitsu, he's in his 60s, but he definitely comes out and watches my tournaments and stuff. My guy Keith, who got me started, I tell him all the time it saved my life. Josue took me under his wing. Addison, who's been a huge inspiration, my coach Orlando, um, Patrick, and then Alicia from Carlson Gracie out in Phoenix. There's a really cool story there to tell. But long story short, I was at a tournament uh, 6 hours away from my house, and she dropped what she's doing and came over and sat in my corner, and that's kind of where I fell in love with the sport was finding the fact that I had the same gym patch on my back. She was able to come in and just jump in and say, "Hey, I'll coach you." It really made me feel like I was part of a community, which is really what's kept me here. So be nice to the folks that you're with, be a good training partner. And yeah, that's really all I had, man. And thank you. Thank you and everybody that's listening to hearing me rant and going over everything I had to say. So definitely want to say thank you for the opportunity to talk. And this has been really fun.
Oh man, thank you again. When you reached out to me, you're asking about other podcasts in my collection to listen to. I was like, well, dude, why don't you come on and be one of those episodes? Like, so thank you for reaching out. Thank you for giving me your time. And again, I want to have you back on again. This was fun. This was a lot of fun. I feel like, as these conversations kind of grow and you get to know each other, you build a friendship. So this was a lot of fun. It feels like, again, talking to an old friend, just sitting here cracking jokes and laughing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to reach out to me and ask me questions on weight loss, or if they're struggling with something from a heavy perspective and they're trying to use jujitsu to lose weight, I'm please reach out to me. I'll give you anything I know, and if I can't figure it out, and if I don't know it, I'll help you figure it out. I'll find someone who does. I've had a lot of great resources, and that's been a huge reason why I was able to stay in the sport. And I would love to be able to help anybody out that wants assistance of any sort with jujitsu and losing weight.
Excellent. I'll make sure to put your Instagram handle in the notes so that way people know where to reach you.
Cool. Awesome, Dante. Thank you so much, sir.
No problem, no problem. And everyone else out there who's listening, thank you as always. If y'all got any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out to me at bjj.wiki on Instagram or Off the Mats Podcast on Instagram, either or. You know, if you want to be a guest on the show, reach out, let me know. I'm a friendly guy and I'm not going to say no unless you want to talk about something fucking weird, but the weirder the better. So if you want to get on here and get like freaky, let's go, son. Let's do it. But otherwise, I'm here. I want to give a big shout out to my good friends Eric and Allie over there, Armbar Addict. I need to reach out to Allie. So hey, if y'all are listening, Allie, I saw you out there competing over the weekend at ADCC and everything. So like, we got to get you back on here, girl. And big shout out to my guys over at Nerd Rage Radio, Bobby, Joe, Chris. Love you guys. And last shout out is to my other show, So You Like Horror. Go check it out if you like scary shit. I watched Exorcist tonight before recording, and I got the Exorcist 3 on in the background right now. And there was a weird knock on my door that I can't explain, and my daughter's bedroom door is closed, so I'm fucking freaked out. But I'm probably going to talk about that this Friday on the upcoming episode. So stay tuned. Otherwise, thank you as always. I love you all. You guys keep listening. I'm going to keep making these shows. Thank you, everyone. And bye.
Deeper with it. Now let me sing a song.